Hello and welcome. Today's Wednesday, which means I'm going to be making a video about Commander today. And for this week's Commander deck, it's just a simple mono white Weenies deck. And to jump right into it, the Commander is Anafenza, Kintree Spirit. It's a 2-mana 2/2. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, you get to bolster 1. And going into the regular creatures, you got 1-drop 1/1, Champion of the Parish. Whenever another human enters the battlefield under your control, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on Champion of the Parish. So you can see already, most of the deck is going to be based around humans. We got Kithion, Hero of Akros. It's a 2/1 legendary creature for 1 mana. At the end of turn, if Kithion, Hero of Akros, and at least 2 other creatures attack this turn, you get to exile Kithion and return to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control. It also has the ability to pay 3 and give it indestructible at the end of turn. The backside of it, not super exciting, but Gideon Battleforged. You get that +2, and then up to 1 target creature and opponent controls attacks Gideon if it's able to in the next combat. So it kind of saves you from some damage by forcing them to attack Gideon. You get the +1 untap target creature, it gains indestructible until the end of turn. And you can pay 0 to make it the classic 4/4 indestructible, prevent all damage to it, Gideon. We got Mother of Runes, just a 1 mana 1/1 human, and you can tap it to give target creature control protection from the color of your choice. So this one's really useful. You're usually going to want to leave this card untapped, and so if someone's playing a kill spell on one of your creatures, you always have the ability to just give it protection from whatever color that card is. Sarah Ascendant, so 1 mana 1/1, and this card's insanely powerful in Commander because it has lifelink, and it has the ability that says as long as you can have 30 or more life, it gets +5/+5 in flying. So that means you cast this on turn 1, it's a 6/6 flying lifelink in Commander since you start at 40 life. There's Student of Warfare, it's a 1 mana 1/1 level up, and every time you level it up, it goes from, at levels 2 to 6, it has first strike and it's a 3/3, and after level 7 it becomes a 4/4 double strike. So if you don't have a lot of cards to cast later in the game, it's going to be a good way to spend your extra mana. There's Weathered Wayfinder, just a mana fixer, it's a 1 mana 1/1 human, and you can pay 1 to tap it and search your library for a land card, reveal it, and put it in your hand. And then shuffle your library after this. And you can only activate this ability if an opponent controls more lands than you. Aegis of the Gods, not a super important card, but it's a 2 mana 2/1 enchantment creature, human soldier. It says you have hexproof. So this can be good against other specific decks that are trying to target you. Maybe decks that are trying to like fireball you out of the game, or maybe things that have like a lot of discard spells that are targeting you. And just like it's kind of a specific way to protect yourself a little bit. Got Auriok Champion, it's a 2-drop 1/1 protection from black and reds, which means it's really hard to use kill spells on it. And whenever another creature enters the battlefield, you get to gain 1 life. Consul's Lieutenant, 2-drop 2/1 first strike with Renown 1, and whenever it attacks, if it's renowned, other attacking creatures you control get +1/+1 until the end of turn. Hanwire Militia Captain, at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 4 or more creatures, you get to transform it, and it goes from a 2/2 to its power and toughness are equal to the number of creatures you control. And at the beginning of your end step, you get to put a 1/1 white human creature token onto the battlefield, white and black. And although it's not an actual creature, it's a token, which means it won't trigger Anafenza. It is a human, so it will trigger things like Champion of the Parish. This next card is Hidden Dragonslayer. It's kind of like a removal spell in the form of a human. It's a 2 mana 2/1 lifelink if you just cast it for its face value, but you can morph it for 3 colorless mana. And you can pay 3 to megamorph it, and you can turn it face up, put a +1/+1 counter on it, and when it turns face up, you can destroy target creature with power 4 greater than an opponent controls. You got Knight of the White Orchid. This card's especially good if you're on the draw. It's a 2 mana 2/2 first strike, and when it enters the battlefield, if an opponent controls more lands than you, you can search your library for a plains card and put it on the battlefield untapped and shuffle your library. Precinct Captain, 2 mana 2/2 first strike, human soldier. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, put a 1/1 white soldier token onto the battlefield. Thalia's Lieutenant, it's a pretty good one. It's a 2 mana 1/1 human soldier. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on each other human you control. And whenever another human enters the battlefield, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on Thalia's Lieutenant. Next card is Thalia, Guardian of Thraben. It's a 2 mana 2/1 first strike, and non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast. And although you do have a few non-creature spells in this deck, which it will affect, it will make those cost more. There's definitely going to be other commander decks that have a lot more non-creature spells that's going to hurt more. Adaptive Automaton. It's a 3 mana 2/2, and when it's battlefield, you're going to choose human, you get to choose a creature type. and it is the chosen type, and other creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1, so it's gonna beef up those guys. Got Bastion Protector. It's a 3 mana 3/3. It says commander creatures you control will get +2/+2 and have indestructible. So when you cast your Anafenza on turn 2, and then you cast your Bastion Protector on turn 3, you're gonna get the bolster effect, giving Anafenza a +1/+1 counter, and you're gonna get a +2/+2 and indestructible from Bastion Protector, making it a 5/5 indestructible. Fiendslayer Paladin. It's a 3 mana 2/2 first strike lifelink, and it can't be the target of black or red spells your opponents control. So again, can't really be killed using kill spells. Frontline Medic, which is an exceptionally good one. It's a 3 mana 3/3 and has Battalion. Whenever it and at least 2 other creatures you control attack, creatures you control are indestructible this turn. You can also sacrifice the counter target spell with X in its mana cost unless its controller pays 3. Mangora of Corondor. It's a 3 mana 1/1, and again, it's just going to remove a spell in the form of a human. You can exile it and exile target permanent from the game. Mentor of the Meek. This is useful since white doesn't really have a whole lot of draw card. It's a 3 mana 2/2 human, and whenever another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield, which is most creatures in the deck, if enters the battlefield under your control, you can pay 1, and if you do, you get a draw card. Mirror Entity. It's a 3 mana 1/1, and it's a shapeshifter, so technically not a human, but it has the ability to change a link, which means it's every creature type, so it is a human. And later in the game, this is really good because you get to pay X, and just until the end of the turn, creatures you control have base power and toughness XX and gain all creature types, so it's going to make all your creatures huge. There's Recruiter of the Guard. It's a 3 mana 1/1, and when it enters the battlefield, you get to search your library for any creature with toughness 2 or less, reveal it, and put it in your hand, which is a lot of creatures in this deck. Silverblade Paladin. It's a 3 mana 2/2 with Soul Bond. When it enters the battlefield, you get to pair it with another creature, and as long as this remains paired with the other creature, both creatures have double strike. There's Angel of Jubilation. It's a 4 mana 3/3. Other non-black creatures you control get +1/+1 till the end of the turn. Where was it? Not until the end of the turn, they just get +1/+1. And players can't pay life or sacrifice creatures to cast spells or activate abilities. Angelic Field Marshal, the 4-drop 3/3 flying with Lieutenant, and as long as you control your commander, Angelic Field Marshal gets +2/+2, and creatures you control have vigilance. This deck card is Cho Mana Revolutionary. Not a great card, but it's okay. It's a 4 mana 2/2 human, and prevent all damage that would be dealt to it. So it's not indestructible, but during combat, nothing can actually deal damage to it. Dragon Scale General. It's a 4 mana 2/3. At the beginning of your end step, you get the bolster X, where X is the number of tapped creatures you control. So assuming that you're attacking with all your creatures every turn, you're going to make one creature a turn get really big. Hero Bladehold. It's 4 mana 3/4 Battle Cry. Whenever this creature attacks, each other attacking creature gets +1/+0 until the end of turn. And whenever a Hero Bladehold attacks, you get to put 2 1/1 white soldier creature tokens onto the battlefield tapped and attack you. Kongming Sleeping Dragon. It's 4 mana 2/2. Other creatures you control get +1/+1. It's another way to bulk up your guys. Michiko Konda Truth Seeker. It's a 4 mana 2/2. Whenever a source an opponent controls deals damage to you, that player has to sacrifice a permanent. So that's a pretty mean one. Riders of Gavany. Now this can be pretty selective against only tribal decks, but it's useful in other scenarios too. The 4 mana 3/3 Vigilance. So when it enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type. And humans you control have protection from the chosen creature type. The next one is Selfless Squire. It's a 4-drop 1/1 flash. When it enters the battlefield, you get to prevent all combat damage that will be dealt to you. But also it says whenever the damage that would be dealt to you is prevented this way, put that many +1/+1 counters on Selfless Squire. So if your opponent decides to go for an all-out attack on you, you get to cast Selfless Squire, prevent all that damage, make a huge creature, untap, and just beat your opponent's face. You got Angel of Invention. It's a 5-drop 2/1 flying vigilance lifelink. Fabricate 2. So when it enters the battlefield, you can either put 2 +1/+1 counters on it or make 2 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature tokens. And it says other creatures you control get +1/+1. Angelic Overseer. It's a 5 mana 5/3 flying, and as long as you control a human, which is going to be pretty much always, it gets hexproof and indestructible. Archangel of Doom, probably arguably one of the best cards in the deck. It's a 5 mana 3/4 flying lifelink. And whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on it for on +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Pentarch Paladin, 5-drop, 3/3 with flanking. And when it comes into play, you get to choose a color, and you pay 2 and tap, destroy a target permanent of the chosen color. So if you're playing against a monocolored deck, this is really going to hurt them. Krovak's Ascendant Hero, it's a 6-drop 4/4. It says other white creatures you control get +1/+1, so all your creatures. And non-white creatures get -1/-1. So unless your opponent happens to also be playing mono white, it's probably going to hurt them a little bit. It also has this neat ability where you can pay 2 life and return Krovak's to its owner's hand. So even if you're tapped out and your opponent casts a board wipe, you get to just spend 2 life to save one of your creatures. Got Darian, King of Kajaldor. It's a 6-drop, 3/3, and whenever you're dealt damage, you get to put that many 1/1 white soldiers tokens into play. Soul of Theros, it's a 6-drop, 6/6 vigilance, and you get to pay 6, and creatures you control at +2/+2 and gain first strike and lifelink until the end of turn, which is pretty insane. And even if this guy dies, you can pay 6 and exile him from your graveyard and have that same ability again. Sun Titan, this is a good late game card, 6-drop, 6/6 vigilance again. And when it enters the battlefield or attacks, you get to return target permanent card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Archangel of Strife, 7-drop, 6/6 flying. When it enters the battlefield, you get to choose War or Peace, and in this deck, you'll probably be choosing War most of the time. And creatures controlled by the players who chose War get +3/+0, and creatures controlled by the players who chose Peace get +0/+3. Elishtorn, really powerful card, 7-drop, 4/7 vigilance. Other creatures you control get +2/+2. Creatures your opponents control get -2/-2. So it's going to be killing a lot of your opponent's creatures. With a combination of this and Krovak's, you're probably going to be wiping out half their board already. For Planeswalkers, you got a Johnny Goldmane. So a 4-drop comes down with 4 loyalty. +1 is you gain 2 life. -1 is put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, and then those creatures gain vigilance until the end of turn. And then his -6 is put a white avatar creature token on the battlefield, which has this creature's power and toughness are each equal to your life total, which in Commander, that can be really good when you start with 40 life. Elspeth Sun's Champion, 6-drop, comes out with 4 loyalty. +1, you get to create 3 1/1 white soldiers, put them on the battlefield. -3, destroy all creatures with power 4 or greater. And -7, which is insane in this deck, you get an emblem that says creatures you control get +2/+2 and at flying. So not only are you bulking up all your guys, but now they're going to be much harder to block as well. For spells, we just got a few. Gaze of Justice. There's an additional cost to cast this. You have to tap 3 untapped creatures you control, white creatures, and it's a 1-drop sorcery, and you just get to exile target creature, and it also has flashback for 6 mana. Path to Exile, classic. You get the 1-drop exile target creature. Its controller may search as a library for a basic land card, put on the battlefield tapped. Swords to Plowshares, 1-drop instant, exile target creature, its controller gains life because of its power. Door of Destinies, this is our only artifact in the deck, it's a pretty good one. 4-drop, and when it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type, human obviously. And when you cast a spell of the chosen type, you get to put a charge counter of Door of Destinies, and creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1 for each charge counter on Door of Destinies. You got Land Tax, this is really good if you ever get behind on land, it's a 1-mana enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, if an opponent controls more lands than you, then you get to search your library for 3 planes, put them in your hand. This is basic land, but in this deck, planes. Honor of the Pure, it's a 2-drop, and this is white creatures you control get +1/+1. Quarantine Field, it's kind of like an Oblivion Ring, but you just get to exile X non-land permanents instead of just 1. Always Watching, so 3-drop, says non-token creatures you control get +1/+1 and have vigilance. Glorious Anthem, 3-drop, creatures you control get +1/+1. Path of Bravery, it's a good one. 3-drop enchantment, as long as your life total is greater than or equal to your starting life total, creatures you control get +1/+1. And whenever one or more creatures you control attacks, you gain life equal to the number of attacking creatures. Spear of Heliod is a 3-mana enchantment and artifact. Creatures you control get +1/+1, and you can pay 3 and tap it to destroy a target creature that dealt damage to you this turn. Crescendo of War can be insanely powerful if you play it really early in the game. At the beginning of your upkeep, you get to put a Strife counter on it, and attacking creatures and blocking creatures you control get +1/+0 for each Strife counter on it. Marshal's Anthem, a 4-drop with multi-kicker for 2. It says creatures you control get +1/+1, and when it enters the battlefield, return up to X target creatures from your graveyard to the battlefield, where X is the number of times it was kicked. Katara's Crusade says whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. True Conviction, 6-mana enchantment. Creatures you control have double strike and lifelink, which is insane powerful at the end of the game. And then Mistveil Plains is the only non-basic land. It's not really even that powerful. It just comes into play tapped, and you can pay 1 and tap it to put target card from your graveyard into the bottom of your library. Just a good way to get other cards back that have already died. And that's all for this episode, so thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.